Our planet is covered with 3/4 of water, which means that all the events in human history so far have taken place in a tiny area. So why wouldn't there be unusual events that surprise us in the vast and endless oceans? Why wouldn't there be unknown lives in the open seas? There are such incidents occurring in the dark depths of the oceans that it is difficult for human minds to provide a logical explanation for these cases. One of the most interesting events in the history of seafaring is mentioned in a 2-page letter from Burak Reis, a Turkish pirate who died in 1500. The summary of the letter is as follows. While we were sailing off the coast of Algiers at night, a beam of light from a distance was reported to be approaching us in the middle of the dark sea by the sailors. Thinking that it was an enemy fleet, we took a battle position and extinguished all the torches on our ships to hide. When the enemy ships approached us, we opened fire on them with our cannons, but the shots passed through these ships and fell into the sea, even hitting our own ships. We could not understand what was happening, but this fleet made up of light passed through our ships like a white shadow, resembling spirits or dead people. There were different beliefs among pirates, whether Turkish or foreign, at that time. It was believed that pirates who died on the ship continued to live as a spirit in the sea. And instead of burying the pirates on land, funeral ceremonies were held on the ship, and their bodies were thrown into the sea. Burak Reis also believed in this belief, as he thought that the extraordinary fleet made up of light he saw belonged to spirits or dead pirates who continued to live in the sea. This event is still unexplained. Another event happened to a salvage team in the 1980s. The incident is as follows. The research team reaches the wreckage of a luxury passenger ship called Odin, which sank in the 1930s and lies 60 meters deep in the sea. When the team dives to examine the wreckage, the scene they encounter will cause one of their friends to die and the others to quit their jobs. Melissa Kimbrell, a member of the research team, tells the story. 4 members of my 8-person team were waiting on our boat while the remaining 4 of us dived to examine the wreckage. The ship had collided with the rocks and sank, and a large crack indicated this. We started to examine the compartments of the ship by entering inside through that crack. The depths of the sea are silent and dark, which always scared me. As my friends and I were walking through the ship's cabins, we came across human bodies. These bodies were unable to survive when the ship sank, and they drowned where they were. Bodies with gold jewelry, necklaces, and clothes were standing right there, as if waiting for someone to come for years. We were also staring at them. When we entered the restaurant section of the ship, my friends and I were faced with a sight that would change our lives. Passengers, people, were there as if the ship had not sunk. Soft music was playing, passengers were eating, and some were even dancing. Oh my God, it seemed like the last night before the ship sank was being relived by the dead people here again and again. We quickly headed towards the exit to escape from there. When we reached our own boat upstairs, I realized that we were only 3 people. One of my friends had apparently suffered a heart attack and died there due to what he had seen, but we couldn't muster the courage to go back down to that wreck again. Thank God, since that day, I have never set foot on the seas again. In 1902, the Queen 7, an English ship with 90 passengers, set off for America. The ship had the families of British businessmen and some high-ranking royal officials on board. The ship left land in June 1902, but it never arrived in America on the expected date. Although a few days' delay was considered normal at the time, the fact that no signal had been received began to intrigue people. After a week, there was still no news from Queen 7. While it was thought that the ship could not withstand the strong ocean waves and sank, Queen 7 was a special ship. We quickly headed towards the exit to escape from there. When we reached our own boat by going up, I realized that there were 3 of us. I think one of them was my friend who had a heart attack and died there, faced with what he saw. But we couldn't muster the courage to go back down to that ship again. Thank God, since that day, I haven't been able to step into the seas again. In 1902, an English yacht named Queen 7 with 90 passengers, including the families of British businessmen and some senior royal officials, set off for America. The ship left the land in June of 1902, but did not reach America on the expected date. Although a few days' delay was considered normal at that time, the fact that no signs were received started to worry people. A week passed and there was still no news from Queen 7. Although it was thought that the ship could not withstand the strong ocean waves and sank, Queen 7 was a special ship. And it has survived countless waves, crossing the distance between England and America many times. After a few weeks had passed, the British press began to report on the ship's sinking because no trace of it had been found, and there was no indication of a pirate attack. However, 3 years later in 1905, a shocking development occurred that shook the British public. Villagers in a coastal area of India woke up one morning to find the ship named Queen 7 near their village. But there was no sign of passengers or crew inside the ship, and no trace of a pirate attack or any other signs of violence were found. Footprints or signs of attack were also not found on the ship's deck. Queen 7 had reappeared 3 years after its disappearance, thousands of kilometers away from its route, and had run aground on the coast of India. It was impossible for such a large ship to disappear for 3 years, especially in the 1900s when sea transportation was dominant. It would have had to encounter a pirate ship or any other passenger ship in the world in such a short time. Additionally, there was not a single trace of any person inside the ship. Where had these people gone, and how had the ship managed to reach thousands of kilometers away from its route? The Queen 7 incident still remains a mystery. Another incident that took place at sea was in the port of Sinop in Turkey. According to reports, a signal was received from a Russian ship in 2007. The ship was approaching the port, but no notification had been made that such a ship would arrive that day. In fact, the name of this ship, Swanovsky, is not even on the 6-month record list. The port workers, surprised by the ship appearing on the radar, contact the captain of the ship. The captain, speaking in English, replies, "We are approaching the harbor and will be there in 20 minutes." The port workers warn the captain that the ship is not registered and not allowed to enter. However, the captain repeats the same message, "Approaching the harbor, we will be there in 20 minutes, and the port workers are forced to grant permission. But the ship never arrives and disappears from the radar signals. The port workers report the incident to the Coast Guard and Port Authority, and the mystery of the incident is revealed. An older port worker said, "During World War II, a ship approaching Sinop harbor was sunk by the Germans. The last message received from the ship was, "We are approaching the harbor, we will be there in 20 minutes." Interestingly and unexplainably, between 10 and 20 years later, the radar signals of this ship were picked up by the harbor, and the allocation conversations continued in the same way. Perhaps one of the most interesting events in the seas is the incident that happened to a French diving instructor. In the 90s, the diving instructor took tourists on short diving trips and showed them the incredible beauty underwater. Once, when they were about 30 meters deep, he realized that his oxygen tank was empty. He tried to quickly surface, but passed out due to lack of oxygen and disappeared at depth. Other divers who witnessed the situation managed to pull him out. During this time, the diving instructor was unconscious for about 4 minutes at a depth of 30 meters. When he came to, his account of what he saw would send shivers down anyone's spine. According to the diving instructor, he opened his eyes and found himself lying on the sea floor. However, there were people around him, even houses and children that he saw. Their clothes were also like something from an earlier era, resembling the clothing of people who had died in shipwrecks many years ago. He cannot dive in that area anymore. It is unknown how much of what was described actually happened, but the vast majority of our planet, which is covered by the oceans, holds many unusual mysteries and interesting events that we are not aware of. It is possible that there are terrifying creatures that will chill our blood, just as there are many interesting cases on the tiny parts of our planet that are land. Why not in the dark depths of the oceans, the endless seas? Don't forget to like the video and subscribe.